Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the integrated postural training with exercise, etc. Hopefully, what we're going to be able to do today is to talk a little bit about what all postural training entails and exactly what do we need to do as fitness professionals to really help our clients to understand why this is important. So many people are under the impression that postural training is just standing up straight. And what we want to do is to make sure that we are providing a proper programming as well as providing proper exercises and stretches. But we also are wanting to make sure that we are able to provide them with the information as to why this is important. I know a lot of times my clients really want to know the why. And I love that. I love teaching them and I love making sure that they understand and develop, those processes and thoughts and understandings on their own. But it's also important for them to know that, even if they stop training with me, if they understand the why of the importance, then they're going to be much more, um, willing to continue doing that as they move forward on their own. Well, my name is April Bolter. I'll be with you guys for the next couple of hours. So you see a number of my information and whatnot on the screen. I'm currently finishing my PhD. I'm ABD for a PhD in prevention science. So I'm currently doing the last bit of research. And on prevention, one of the large things that I have looked at, I look at both ends of the spectrum. So I look a lot with pediatric obesity and childhood obesity. And I also spend a lot of time researching and publishing on fall prevention. So the reason why the fall prevention comes in so important is because so many things as we age start to go forward. Our posture goes forward, maybe because we have weakened muscles, maybe because we sit in chairs all day. But as we age, they really start to have that forward posture and that upper cross syndrome. We've even been able to see that a lot of the forward posture in our older patients and our older clients happens because they're looking down at the floor and they're afraid to fall. So a big part of a lot of my research and time has been spent on looking at how can we move the body into a more correct and anatomical position. So, I always tell everybody to think of everything from anatomical position because that is really where everything has to be in posture perfect. If you are having people work out or lift weights or do any sort of additional exercises and they do not have that posture perfect, you're setting them up for failure. Because if people are not in correct position, not in anatomical position, and they're not able to support their body, the reason people have imbalances or poor posture is generally because of a compensation. And if you are adding weight to someone whenever they're not in that good posture position, then you are just reinforcing the bad. And that's where I've spent a lot of my time and a lot of my research hours, honestly, has been in looking at those two different options within the lifespan. And that's what I always tell everybody. I say I get people growing up. How can we make sure that they're fit and healthy for life? And I get people at the end of their life cycle. And now we're trying to see how can we give you the best possible day-to-day activities. So I'm always happy to answer any questions, and you're welcome to reach out to me if you do have any questions about anything that we cover today. Well, I know that you are here for the next 2 hours. In my mind, I like to think that you're here to listen to my sharp and quick humor, but in reality, I understand that you're probably here for your continuing education certificate, and I won't hold that against you. But here's how you're going to get it. The first thing that you're going to want to do is to view this complete webinar. After you do that, you're going to print the 20-question quiz that is required. You're going to print it and then write your answers on a separate piece of paper. The great news is this 20-question quiz is going to follow this webinar almost to a T. It will follow slide by slide. We try to make sure that we stay in the correct order, chronological order, because we don't want you to have to flip through slides and pages. The great news is the majority, all of the information, actually not the majority, all of the questions will be based on your handouts. That way we don't want you to have to worry about answering questions as you move through. You can look at your handouts and things of that sort. So that way, after you get done, you can use your handout, take your 20-question quiz, write your answers on a separate piece of paper. Then we want you to go to our website. And our website is www.exerciseetc.com. And you're going to see at the top right of the screen a tab called Administration. Please click on that tab, and from the drop-down menu, be sure to click on Integrated Postural Training. Now, some of our webinars do have similar titles, so it is incredibly important that you click on the exact title of this webinar, which is Integrated Postural Training. Then you have to enter the exact email that you used when you purchased this program. So those are the two things that have to be spot on. Then just simply transfer your test answers to the website and click to complete the evaluation. You're going to have a few other fields that you must complete, including your name, certifying agencies, and things of that sort. And then you're going to click on Get Certificate. So your certificate of completion will be automatically emailed to you. So that way there's no more trying to print or, maintain or keep up with one sheet of paper. So we try to make it easy on you. Once you have it in your email, you can save it to your desktop, keep it in your email, you can print it, whatever works best for you, but that way you'll always have a copy of it. So here's a little nugget of information. Please remember to complete this webinar and to print your certificate of completion by December 31st of the year it was purchased. So if certificates have next year's date on them for completion, it may not be accepted by your credentialing organization. So please be sure that the date the year that you purchased the webinar must be the same as whenever you completed the webinar in order to make sure that it lines up with your credentialing organization. Some of them really get finicky, and they'll make you pay late fees if you don't do enough CECs in the allotted time. So that's always something we try to make sure that all of our clients at Exercise Etc. are aware of. All right, and with that, let's jump in right now. So our whole goal today is to look at the posture. And we have a couple of things that we want to look at whenever we're looking at understanding posture. So the first thing is we want to understand what is a neutral spine. And so you can see the curves here on this. Oops. No, I won't use that pen. Sometimes I like to get fancy. So you can see, this is why I don't use the pen. Some things that you can look at is understanding what we're going to be seeing as neutral spine. And a lot of novice fitness professionals really start to look at the spine and they think it's a straight line, and it's not. The spine follows the curvature of the body, or I should say the body should follow the curvature of the spine. And we have right here the cervical vertebrae up on our top. And so these are our top 7 going all the way up here, atlas and all the way down, of our cervical vertebrae. Then we have a slight outward curve in the thoracic spine with these 12. Oh, I have to stop clicking. I'm so sorry. With these 12 right here. So you'll see that posterior curvature, as you're looking at it from a side view, does have that small curvature. And then there's also a curvature down here at the lumbar spine. So that's something that we really want to be aware of. So this is something that I want you to look at though. So whenever we do, postural assessments, and we'll talk very briefly about using a plumb line to do a postural assessment. But look right here at the very center of this spine right here, on our very top, number one of our cervical vertebra, and we go all the way down in this straight line. Lost my pointer. There we go. All the way down in this straight line, which is how the plumb line should fall. You'll notice that that top of this number one should line up right down here with basically the dead center of our lumbar 5. So that's something to really be aware of whenever we're understanding about what is spine neutral. So if you have that plumb line and you drop it down and you're seeing this thoracic region, protrude posterior, or, an excessive posterior protrusion, then you're going to see that that's a little bit of a deviation. Another really common one is this lumbar area here having an anterior or forward deviation. So that's something that we want to look at. You can gain so much information purely and simply from just doing, what I call static assessments. Just looking at the body, looking at the symmetry, is one side higher than the other on shoulders? If you're looking at them from the front, if you're looking at them from the side view or the auxiliary view, is there an anterior posterior deviation? As you're moving to the posterior view, looking at the ankles and maybe they're having an inward or an outward collapse. There's so many things that we can look at from just this static assessment. And understanding posture is one of the key components of these static assessments. Something that we also, in order to look at the posture, is we want to understand and improve the firing sequence of the core muscles. We're going to talk about the inner unit and the outer unit, or the local unit of the inner unit. And that's something that we really want to make sure that we are understanding is what all goes into the core. And, so many people come into personal training sessions and they are under the impression that the core is just, abdominal muscles. They're thinking that the core is just a six-pack. And we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to also be able to educate them about why that is something that we need to look at this from a more holistic standpoint and a more holistic view. Now, here's the deal. All 3 planes are so important when looking at the core. Going back to fall prevention here, we're a very forward society. We tend to only move in one plane. So we sit at our desk, and if you've been with me for other webinars, you hear me say that tagline all the time because it's probably my number one quote, is we're a very forward society. We sit at our desk, we watch our TVs, we drive our cars, we're at our computers. Everything is forward. So many times people stop and forget to do the reverse and to open up that chest. So we have to make sure that we are training in all 3 planes because the body moves in all 3 planes. And I'm going to give you an example about why this is important. I spent, if you've been with me before, you know that I've spent 10 years in downtown Chicago. And there is so much ice and so much snow in everything. And there's so many people in Chicago that do not shovel their sidewalks. And it makes me fight and angry because think about whenever you're walking. And I was always a goofball because half the time I would wear my work shoes as I walked to work. And, a lot of times shoes that, ballet flats and things like that don't have the best traction. So lo and behold, I'd always be walking, and at some point, once a week, I would always slip on ice or snow that was packed down. So I've gone from a forward motion, and now suddenly I've got my foot has slipped out from under me. Think about whenever you slip. The first thing you do is your arms go up in the air whenever you slip. So now you've gone from this forward motion, your arms are initially already lifted, so now you've just changed your center of gravity. And if your foot has slipped out in front of you, you get that sensation of falling immediately. And what's the first thing you do is you go to put your hands down. Most people go to put their hands down and look for the ground. And if your feet are in front of you, the ground is going to be coming at you very fast and most likely behind you. because now you've changed your center of gravity, so you're probably going to be falling on your rear end. So as you're looking over your shoulder, most people are right dominant, most people are going to be looking over their right shoulder. We've gone from a very forward society. Now we've just raised our arms in the air, changed our center of gravity, and now we're looking over our right shoulder. So now we are twisting. Now we've gone from one motion into a transverse plane. So we've just crossed 3 planes of motion. So whenever we're going and looking at this movement, your body moves in all 3 planes of motion. And whenever your body is put into something that I call surprise situations, you're going to go through all 3 planes. And I got to tell you, from all the times that I've fallen walking on snow and ice, it's rarely the fall that hurts. You know, I'm lucky. I'm still pretty relatively young. I don't really have to worry about breaking a hip whenever I fall. Thank goodness, hopefully. But the one thing that hurts the most is usually my back, usually my abs, because I've went from just a standard forward motion, you know, I'm working on that sagittal plane, and now I've just twisted, and now I'm looking for that transverse plane because I'm looking over my shoulder, reaching for the ground. And so I've really crossed so many planes of movement so quickly that my muscles probably weren't ready. And whenever your body prepares for impact, usually most muscles clench and we get, we get really tight. So then add that to the impact. I've just reached up, I've twisted, and then I've done a full body flex. And so that's usually where the majority of my soreness comes from every time that I would slip. And unfortunately, I'm a pretty clumsy person, so I tend to do that a lot. So that's one thing, and it gives you a real world example about why training in all 3 planes is so important. Your body, whether you want it to or not, is going to move in all 3 planes of resistance. So you might as well prepare it, and you might as well get it in that right area and in that right frame of mind to handle that. Once you have your body set and you're in posture perfect, you're able to move through all 3 planes of movement, then that's the time that we want to add some resistance. But I tell you, the resistance is the very last step. We want to make sure that we have our clients where they are able to maintain that posture, that they have the strength to maintain the stability of those joints. Once we are at that stage, that's when we add the resistance. You know, clients can get mad at you all they want, and if you're doing body weight exercises until they are blue in the face, let them be angry. But this way, you know that they are safe, and you know that their muscles are learning the correct, and maybe relearning the correct patterns. All right, this is probably, if you've been with me, you know that I like to rank my favorite slides. And if you are going to keep a rank in order, this is what I would call April Bolter's favorite slide number 1. Because this gives you, and granted some of these are a little exaggerated, but this gives you a great look and a great idea about what are the most common postural deviations. So first of all, let's look here at the postural good posture, far right. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at that plumb line going straight down all the way through earlobe, AC joint, acromioclavicular joint, through the hip, and then right all the way down to that midpoint of that ankle. Okay? So keep this in mind. This right here is posture perfect. So that's our good posture. So then what we want to go is, judging from this, now let's look at all of these deviations. So here, the first one that you're going to see is this lumbar lordosis. And we're going to talk about each one of these pretty individual. We kind of combine the kyphosis and forward head because you usually see them together. But we'll talk about each of these individually. So with this lumbar lordosis, so we've got this belly poking out. You know, you'll see a lot of an anterior tilt here. So if your hips, let's see if I can get my pointer. If your hips are a bucket of water, you see how this hip line is pointing down? So if your hips were a bucket of water, the way it's tilted here is that water is going to be spilling out the front. So that's called an anterior pelvic tilt. So oftentimes you'll see this really excessive lumbar curve right here. So the opposite of that is the thoracic kyphosis, where in the lumbar lordosis we see an exaggerated lumbar curve. So now in the thoracic kyphosis, we see an exaggerated thoracic deviation. So a lot of times with this, it's very common with the thoracic kyphosis to also see a posterior pelvic tilt where the water would be spilling out the back. And these are generally combined. A thoracic kyphosis is generally combined with that forward head position, because think about it. If you round that back, if you round your upper back, the thoracic region of your back posteriorly, automatically your head tilts down. And in order for you to see in front of you, or people in front of you, or drive, then you have to lift up that head. In order to lift up that head, you have to find this forward head posture. So that's why a lot of times the thoracic kyphosis and forward head you'll see combined. So these are kind of the common deviations. Now our goal here is to be able to find proper mobility. And we really want to be able to establish that. That way our clients understand what the difference is between strength and stability. So stability, is your body's ability to hold and maintain your anatomical position. So this posture perfect. And a lot of times whenever people see these spinal deviations, either an anterior or posterior pelvic tilt, or maybe just the forward head posture, a lot of times people assume that performing just basic traditional exercises for the abs is going to fix your core and it's going to provide you with a stable core. And that's really not true. Stability goes into a lot of different things. In stability, in order to maintain a posture, that really refers to things such as muscular timing, control, proper firing sequences. And so there's a lot more that goes into finding a stable core than just abdominal exercises. And we have to make sure that we establish stability before we can add on mobility and then officially or eventually get linked into strength. So we always want to go stability, then mobility, then adding the resistance to build that strength. So a lot of times as we're moving through these, options, and people just say, oh, I've got terrible posture. Oh, I've got a bad back. A lot of times a novice trainer will say, oh, we've got to work on that core. Abdominal exercises, that's where it's at. And the problem is a lot of times if you ask people, what's a great way to work your abdominals? What do you think the most common answer would be? And it's either going to be a crunch or a sit-up, generally speaking. And here's the problem, is crunches and sit-ups are, usually speaking, generally speaking, are performed on the floor in a supine position. But here, this is where lies the problem. The only time the abdominals are used to flex the core or to flex the spine is whenever you're supine. Whenever you're standing, the abdominal muscles aren't the prime movers of the flexion of the spine. So if we are looking at, training and correcting and adding stability to the core, we can't do that with just basic crunches. And here's another issue to talk about, that people need to be aware of, and this is important to educate your clients on. If you ask other people, what's the best exercise for the core? People say, oh, planks. Planks are where it's at. But how many people use the proper progression of a plank? There are so many variations of a plank, and there are so many progressions of a plank, and there are so many progressions that are more than just putting your knees down or going up on your hands or down on your elbows. That's the tip of the iceberg of planks. And so we have to make sure that whenever we are doing our programming and we are looking at what our protocols are, that we are getting a full picture about what it takes to build stability. And we're going to talk about that today, about what are some of our building block exercises and how can we build and expand upon those and still be able to increase the strength, increase the stability, and really give them the best chance at the highest level of mobility that they can obtain. Now, let's look at what our key goals are to improving our posture. So, our goals for exercise to improve posture is number one, assess. Assess, assess, assess. We want to assess the curvature of the spine. We want to figure out what are the deviations, and we want to evaluate these different reasons for these deviations. What we want to do is to help the client achieve the best neutral spine for them. So coming from, just a fitness background, we may not be able to get a full picture and a full visualization about what their spine's doing. Most gyms are not equipped with x-rays and things like that. So we want to help our clients achieve the best neutral spine for them. And then we want to help and make sure that we can provide challenges to the supporting structures in all of the different planes in order to help them be able to maintain that neutral spine. Whenever I first started out in fitness, I used to always tell my clients, for the hour with me, I want posture perfect. We're going to take this in small increments. And so while you're with me for this hour, we're going to train this constantly. But the more I learned and the more I evolved, I realized that that 1 hour of posture perfect, while it's imperative while you're working and lifting, but if they walk out of the gym and they go right back to just being, in their bad posture, then that 1 hour was wasted. So that's something that I started doing reminders for my clients, and I call them check-ins. And I call it my couch potato check-ins. So if, especially on the weekends, I'll send them a message that says, how long have you spent sitting today? Try to get up and work on your breathing exercises, opening that chest, stretching the shoulders and the chest, and get to breathing. Because it's stuff like that that helps them to remind, if they have a desk job, I'll send them these reminders throughout the week to help to remind them that we have to be focusing on maintaining the posture. We have to get these muscles used to the stability and the strength that it takes to manage and maintain an upright posture. I'm a big fan of dance, ballet and jazz, and I'm also a huge fan of gymnastics. So if you've been with me in the live webinars, you probably remember my background. But the reason that I love those so much is because all of those, modalities in sports really emphasize core strength, posture, stability, and proper breathing. And I think that is something that is so important for you to take to your clients. And we're going to look at how well we can accomplish that. So, the neutral spine, like I said, neutral spine we have to look at for what is going to be the best outcome and best neutral spine for each of our clients. And we have to do that, but we have to be looking at the different muscle units. So we have the inner unit or the local muscles, and these are the ones that directly attach to the spine. So the ones that directly attach to the spine are the ones that you see right here on the left, okay? So this is your diaphragm, helps with the breathing, our transverse abdominis, which is our deepest core muscle, the muscles of the pelvic floor, which most people are aware of the pelvic floor because of Kegel exercises. They're also the muscles that stop you from urinating. And then the multifid or the multifidus muscle that attaches to the spine from the posterior side. So those are your inner unit. They provide the stability and segmental control of the spine. Now, our global muscles or the outer unit. So these are the ones that really give us that torque, These are the ones that provide some general stability, but they also are the ones that provide a lot of the movement. And those are going to be our external obliques, our rectus abdominis, or our six pack, eight pack, our internal obliques, and then even the erectors, the spinal erectors. So these are the ones that we have to understand about how to engage these muscles. So I always like to make sure that people understand about how to engage the transverse abdominis as well as the pelvic floor. Most people know how to do Kegels, so I'll spare you the tutorial and editorialization about how to engage those pelvic floor muscles. But if your clients don't know how to engage the muscles, I tell them to flex the muscles that they would do if they have to stop themselves from urinating or stop themselves from going to the bathroom. So that's your pelvic floor. Now your transverse abdominis, I want you to stand up right now where you are. I want you to stand up nice and tall, posture perfect for me. And take your hands, and I want you to take your hands and put your middle finger on your hip bone and put your thumb on the lowest rib. So right hand does right hip, left hand does left hip. So middle finger is on the top of the hip bones. Thumb is on the lowest rib. Now you're standing up nice and tall. Give me a couple of deep breaths. Go ahead and inhale big and exhale out. One more. Give me an inhale in. Give me an exhale out. Okay? Now, without moving at all, I want you to try to lock. You can't crunch forward, but I want you to lock that lowest rib to that hip bone. Okay? See how you engage that muscles right there? Okay, so that's the first step in engaging. So you're most likely probably engaged. Most people tend to flex their rectus abdominis. But now what I want you to do is to think that I'm going to punch you in the stomach. Okay, but you can't crunch forward. You got to stay upright. That's why your hands are on your hips and your ribs to make sure there's no movement. Now lock in. Make that intra-abdominal pressure, lock that in like I'm going to punch you and you could take it. So that's how you have engaged the entire unit there. So your transverse abdominis engaged, your rectus abdominis engaged, and some people are even able to engage their external obliques with that in order to prepare. That's kind of an advanced movement though, but generally that transverse abdominis and rectus abdominis are the first ones to be engaged. And that's what we want people to be able to understand. I call it locking your core, building your belt. A lot of times, you can go ahead and relax, by the way, just in case you're still standing. A lot of people tend to need to create that intra-abdominal pressure before they do things like squats. And that doesn't mean that you can't breathe. You can create that intra-abdominal pressure and keep that transverse abdominis engaged while still breathing. And it's important to get people to understand about how to engage those muscles while still breathing. It's not just bearing down, it's not just crunching forward, but it's being able to maintain an upright posture, maintain breathing in normal function, but still being able to lock that core in place. And those are great techniques to use with your clients and have them go through. All right, these are some of our essentials to posture training. First thing that we want to do is we want to establish a neutral spine. Once we're able to establish the neutral spine, then we want to be able to help our clients understand how to engage their core while still maintaining the neutral spine. So just like what we just did on the last slide, you're not allowing them to crunch forward, you're not allowing them to bear down. They need to maintain an upright posture and hold that neutral spine and engage. Then what you want to do is we're going to add some challenges. They have that posture engaged. Now we're going to change our position. We're going to vary the resistance. We're going to vary the speed and the vector or trajectory. And then essentially the next thing is what we want to be able to help to understand, or at least to be able to look at, is why are certain muscles tight? What causes that tightness? And that's something that we want to look at. So as we start to go through and look at different muscles that are tight, and we're about to go through looking at our deviations, And we're going to see how some muscles are tight or inhibited or shortened, and other muscles are going to be lengthened or weakened. And so the muscles that are tight tend to really stay in that shortened position because they're having to provide some stability somewhere else in the body that they shouldn't be providing stability to. So here's the deal. If we've got those tight muscles, sure, we can stretch them, but that might only be a temporary fix because they're going to continue to stay in that shortened position unless we can find the underlying issue that's causing that tightness. Then we got to address it. So oftentimes, improving the stability of a joint with the proper musculature that's around it can really help the other muscles to be able to relax. And if they relax, then they're going to be able to fire in the proper sequences. So a lot of times, we can really focus on that proper lumbar spine stability. Um, then a lot, if we can find the stability in that area, then we're going to build to really find the best way to enhance a movement in other areas of their life. And that might be their extremities, that might be different planes, but that's something that we really need to be aware of. And we want to make sure that we're being consistent with that with our clients as well. We just looked at the posture perfect position, with a few slides back. And now what we want to look at is about how all this plumb line is going to go. So like I said, these static assessments are so beneficial and are going to tell us so much. And one of the things that we want to be able to really be aware of is exactly what should be happening where. So hopefully you've got enough on your notes here that you're going to be able to see where this plumb line should fall. I believe this is in your handout, but you'll see in a lot of gyms hang a plumb line, and there's usually it's like a hook and eye that's just screwed into the ceiling or into a door frame, and it has a little hook on it, and there's a string attached to it, and the string falls down, and there's a small weight. Some people use a washer. Some people use what looks like a bullet. It's not a bullet, but I can't think of that word right off the top of my head, in order to weight that string. And then you have clients stand, anterior right here next to it, just like what you see her doing. Now the line should begin at the top of the ear right there. And it wants to go through this ear, right over the AC joint, the acromioclavicular joint, through the shoulder, down through the lumbar spine, slightly posterior to the hip joint. So here, right here would be the top of her hip joint. And then slightly anterior to the axis of the knee. The axis of the knee is the middle point of the movement. So it's not the knee joint, it's the very middle point. If you're looking at it from the side view, the very middle point of the knee, so it's slightly in front of that. And then slightly in front of the ankle bone right here. So that is where you want them to be able to line up. So I like to try to have people stand, and I get their feet where they need to be. And some people start with their head and get their head where it needs to be, and then just see where they stand. And then I just let them stand there for a couple of minutes. And a lot of times I'll stand in front of them, let them talk, just to kind of get them to relax. And then I'll move to the side to see where that line falls. And I really enjoy lining people up from the ear. So, take a couple inches forward or a centimeter forward. Okay, now centimeter back to get them lined up at the ear. But I also really enjoy, after I do that assessment, lining them up from the ankle joint. So getting them on the line about right here where this should be, oftentimes tends to be easier. And then to see where their body falls from there. Because that's something that I think it's good, in my opinion, to have a holistic view. But if you line them up from the top down, it always seems that you get a little bit more information if you go top down as well as bottom up. So that's how I like to do it. Everybody usually can find their own sweet spot. I have some of my staff that they have only, they stand them and then they get the plumb line and attach it, drop it down, and they just do a quick assessment from there. I'm a little bit more of a take a couple steps forward, a couple steps back, millimeter ooch forward, just to try to get the most amount of information as possible. Now, we talked a lot about, that lumbar spine and how important it is. And so now what we want to do is to talk about how we can kind of do a little mini assessment here. So the first thing that we want to do is to stand with the head, the mid-back, and the hips against the wall. So you'll see that Mike here has got his head, his mid-back, and his hips against the wall, and his feet are a little bit forward. Now, what he's doing is you should be able to slide your hand behind your back by the lumbar curve. And you should be able to slide that hand in to about the knuckles. Now, here's a couple of things to look at here. If the client can't keep their head level whenever they're trying to touch the wall with it, this is going to show you that they have that forward head posture. And you're probably thinking, that's crazy, April. Everybody can put their head on the wall. And well, quite frankly, that's false. If somebody has an excessive forward head posture and you tell them to put their head against the wall, I would say 7 times out of 10, at least, what they're going to do to put their head on the wall is they're going to tilt that chin up and look at the ceiling and basically touch the top of the head to the wall. They are not going to pull that head back so that the back of the skull touches the wall. They're going to tilt that chin up. So if you get them lined up and their head isn't touching the wall and they have to tilt that chin up in order to make their head touch the wall, then you're going to know that they have a forward head posture. So that's a pretty easy telltale sign. So if their hand, now talking about their hand, if their hand can slide all the way through underneath their back, because remember, their hand should only be able to slide to about the knuckles, but if they can slide that hand all the way through, then they have an anterior pelvic tilt and most likely an increased lumbar curve. Now, if they cannot even get to their fingers, then they most likely have a posterior pelvic tilt with a reduced lumbar curve. So a lot of times this lower back and pelvic alignment are so closely related. So the optimal curve, hopefully as we've seen in the pictures, is going to have a slight inward curve at the pelvis and relatively level hips. So we talked about how your hips are a bucket of water. So they're going to have a relatively level set of hips. It is okay for somebody to have a slight, very slight anterior tilt, but no more than about 10 degrees of an anterior tilt. And that's still going to be considered a good posture or posture perfect. So that's also another very easy static assessment that you can look over and you can do with your clients. Now let's start to kind of jump in. Did I do? Nope, that's perfect. Let's start to kind of jump in here and let's look at this anterior pelvic tilt. So this picture that you see gives the perfect example about if the hips are a bucket of water. And with an anterior pelvic tilt, you'll see based on this red arrow right here about how if your hips are a bucket of water, the water would fall out the front. Now our shortened muscles, these are going to be our tight muscles, your lumbar extensors, the psoas or the iliopsoas, also hip flexors region there, your rectus femoris, your adductors, and your tensor fasciae lata are also going to be these shortened, tight muscles. So those are the muscles that we're going to want to look at stretching. Now our lengthened muscles are going to be our abdominals, because you see how these hips are pulling these abdominals down, so really causing the lengthening of the abdominals. The hamstrings are being pulled up because of the way the tush tilts up. So these hamstrings are being pulled up, so that's lengthening the hamstrings. That's also lengthening here the gluteus maximus, medius, and minimus. So based on these, we need to be able to do some activation exercises for the abdominals, the hamstrings, and the gluteal compartment. So let's take a look at a couple of great options for this. So the first one here, this is actually one of my, on the left-hand side, our model in pink. This is actually one of my favorite exercises. In here, there's a couple of different things that she's got going on here. So she is really given a good stretch to the psoas as well as the rectus femoris, or the quad muscles. So being able to use this upright posture, and if we were to take a line, from right here, hopefully y'all can see my pointer, straight down, or my cursor, straight down here, that's a good, every time I keep clicking, my apologies. With this straight line right here, what she's able to do is to give a forward lean. So she's got this muscle stretching because she's got her toe back on the wall, so she's getting a good stretch here. But this straight line is also giving a nice stretch. If she wants an additional stretch, so this picture right here would be what I call level 1. And this level 1 picture is great for our beginners, but if she wants that additional stretch, she can take this left arm, because it's her left leg here that is extended, and reach this left arm high up and over her head. So that would be kind of a level 2. So that's going to give a good, bigger, deeper stretch in both the psoas as well as that quad. Now, if she wants an even bigger stretch, she can do a tilt forward, pushing through that hip with that arm extended, and that's going to give an even deeper stretch. So those are some great options to really activate those muscles. Oops, so sorry. I hit the wrong button. So now that we've talked about the muscles that are tight, that we're wanting to lengthen, now let's talk about the muscles that we just said we wanted to activate. So those lengthened muscles, we're talking about, the gluteal compartment as well as the hamstrings need to be activated. So there is no better gluteal activation than a bridge. So you can start, I would call this picture right here on the right-hand side of your screen, I would call this about a level 2. So this is kind of like your bridge marching. So the great thing about that is you can do just your basic bridge, and there's so many variations of your bridge that I think are really worthwhile. But this is a level 2. So once you've gotten used to just having both legs on the ground, pressing up through the heels, having that straight line from this shoulder all the way up to the knee, then you're ready for this bridge marching. So our model would start supine with the knees bent and the heels on the floor. And then as you engage with the left leg pressing up, this right leg comes up into this march position that you see right here. So this is going to be a very high level of activation both on the glute as well as on the hamstring. So be aware to not hold or to do excessive reps, because you're liable to have some beginner clients or maybe some deconditioned clients that really might see some pretty serious cramps going on in this part of the body if they do this. But this is one of the best hamstring and gluteal compartment activation. And, we have a million different webinars that talk about gluteal activation and bridges and variations of the bridges. So I encourage you to check all of those out. So now we talked about the anterior pelvic tilt. Now the posterior pelvic tilt is just the flip side. So if his hips were a bucket of water here, there's definitely a tilt. So we see this water is going to be coming out the back of the bucket. So because they have that back of the bucket, the shortened muscles or the tight muscles are going to be the hamstrings, the gluteus maximus, and the abdominals. And our muscles that are going to be lengthened that need some activation are going to be the iliopsoas or the iliacus and psoas if you look at those individually, and the lumbar extensors. So let's go ahead and give those a look about what are a couple of exercises that we can do in order to really focus on both stretching and strengthening some muscles. So the first thing here that we're looking at, so with that posterior tilt, if you have somebody with that posterior tilt, they're going to have a little bit of a curvature in this spine. So this yoga block is being placed on the back so that they're able to see and maintain a neutral posture. And what I would have them do is to start up in an all four position. And so in a tabletop, all four position, you know, hips over the knees, shoulders over the wrists, and then have that yoga block placed on them. And then just slowly and gently press back into this position that you see our model on the left-hand side doing, and then coming back forward. So essentially what that's doing is a couple different things. One, it's able to give them a physical cue about how to maintain that neutral spine. And that's really important because a lot of times your clients are not even going to be aware that what they have got is that curve. So whenever you can put a physical reminder on their body that allows them to move through and just going from tabletop to this position back here, that is something that is really going to be a great reminder and a physical cue about how they need to engage and move those muscles and move that spine in order to correct that. So again, we've got, this is also a great way to help them move through a range of motion as well. So then we've got a weakened, hip flexors. So because of that, posterior tilt, they've got this hip flexor area that needs to be strengthened. And so with that, so this is going to be our upright marching that you see. So the number one thing is our model has got posture perfect, going straight up and straight down over the hips. Then what we're going to do, and you'll notice that this is not a major movement here. We are not trying to do anything that's going to make her have to curve or tilt or rotate the body in order to make this possible. So you only lift the foot about 6 inches roughly. So then whenever they're going through with that upright posture, maintaining, engage the core, engage that inner unit, and just lift that leg up about 6 inches, activate that iliopsoas and lower down. And then rotate, switch sides to the other side, lift up the other foot about 6 inches and slowly lower down. And then go back to the right, lift about 6 inches and slowly lower down. So see, that's a nice slow cadence that makes it easy for them to follow. But you want to make sure that you are really telling them that we do not want them to lift up that leg so much that it causes them to add a curvature of the spine or arch forward or have to arch back in order to do it. So it might be a slower progression. Your clients might only be able to lift it up 2 inches before they lose that posture perfect, and that's completely fine. So again, take it at your client's pace and then make sure that you're working within their parameters. Now this thoracic spine area, so there's a couple things that, we talk about that are combined. And then the thoracic spine or thoracic spine kyphosis is oftentimes combined with that forward head posture. So with that thoracic spine kyphosis, a lot of times you're going to see really tight upper chest and shoulders. So that pec minor and major, the shoulders are oftentimes rounded forward. The upper trapezius is really tight. Oftentimes the shoulders are also shrugged up to the ears. The scalenes are very tight, and I'm going to give you a stretch for those here in just a minute. And then the levator scapulae is also really tight because that's the muscles that are used to shrug your shoulders, basically to levitate or elevate your scapula. So those are very tight because anytime we have that thoracic kyphosis, you're also going to see that forward rounding or upper cross syndrome. So those are our tight muscles. Tight chest, tight shoulders, tight upper traps, and tight scalenes. So the lengthened muscles, the ones that need to be engaged and activated, are going to be the deep cervical flexors, the rhomboids, the serratus anterior, and then the middle and lower trapezius. So this is the one thing here. So this is the improving thoracic kyphosis. This is one great way to just open up the chest and shoulders. So wherever you are, go ahead and jump down on your floor and get, or if you're in your bed, you can do this in your bed, go ahead and get into our child's pose position. So this is if you were on the ground in a kneeling position, just like in the picture, our hips are over our heels. But for the child's pose position, both of our arms are extended and we are looking down at the ground. So your forehead is essentially on the ground and the arms are extended. Now take the right arm and bend it so that the right hand is on the back of your head. And then what I want you to do is to rotate up just like what you see our model doing and looking at that side wall. So this is a great shoulder opener and chest opener. It's a great way to combat that tightness. Go ahead and do it on the other side. You're welcome to pause me. I'm going to take a drink of water while you do it on the other side. It's always harder to just teach for 2 hours straight on a recorded webinar than a live webinar because usually in a live webinar, somebody will ask a question or type a question and I can take a drink of water. But just talking to you guys straight for 2 hours, I apologize for my little break while you're doing the left side. So I'm going to give you a couple of more options that I'm going to talk you through for the thoracic kyphosis because usually these are the ones that I get the most emails about, is because everybody, like I said, we're a forward society. Everybody has those rounded shoulders, it seems, especially as we age. And everybody wants to know what you can do to combat that. Remember, those scalenes are often tight. So what I want you to do is I want you to have a seat in your chair, wherever you are, wherever you're comfortable, have a seat. Take that left hand and put your left hand on top of your right clavicle or your right collarbone. So my left hand is crossed over my body. I'm sitting up nice and tall. Left hand is on my right clavicle. Now what I want you to do is to rotate over your head so that you are going to put your left ear on your left shoulder. Okay, just tilt it over. Now that you've got it tilted, what I want you to do is to look up at the diagonal of the wall. Okay, so now you're going to look up to the opposite corner of the room, so the very far left-hand side corner of the room, so you're going to be looking up at that diagonal. And that's a great way to stretch those scalenes. And I even have my clients kind of rotate. So we're looking up at the left top corner of the ceiling and then rotate up to just look up directly in front of me. But really keeping that neck extended and that left ear over to the left shoulder as we're doing it. Now switch sides. So now you're going to take your right hand, put your right hand on your right clavicle. Take the right ear, tilt it over to the right shoulder. Now look up at the opposite corner of the room. Now look up. I just realized I think I told you guys the wrong corner on that other one because I don't know my left and right. But you're going to look up now at the very top of the ceiling. So there, go ahead, and we're going to talk you through it one more time because I don't have the ability to rewind and make sure I told you correctly. So you're going to be sitting. Go ahead and take your left hand, put the left hand across the body so the left hand is on the right clavicle. Take the left ear to the left shoulder. Now you're just going to look up to the left corner of the ceiling and then rotate up and look directly at the ceiling above you, but still trying to keep that left ear to that left shoulder. Now go ahead and take a break. Now we're going to switch to the right. So right hand goes on left clavicle. Take that right ear over to the right shoulder. Now look up at the corner of the room, opposite corner of the room. So you're going to be looking at the right corner of the room. And then rotate the eyes up directly over the ceiling in front of you. There we go. So you're going to feel that stretch all the way down on the sides of your neck. And so as you're moving through and you're going through, that's a great way because a lot of times people carry so much tension in their jaw. And as you have people going through that movement and that stretch and just the smallest amount of movement through that dynamic stretching there really gets them where they can feel the tightness that they've been carrying in their jaw and in their neck. So that's one of the ones that I think is really, really important to people to get through because there's so, how many times do you go to a yoga class or do you go to a stretching class or even as a fitness professional, how many times do you stretch your neck? Most people do the lean forward, and tilt to press the chin to the chest. And that's a pretty common one. And a lot of times people will rotate the head to the left and to the right, and then maybe even do a lateral flexion to the left and the right. But how many times do you really focus as much as you can on lengthening and elongating that neck? So that's one of the best things that you can do. Now the next little stretch exercise that I'm going to tell you about to do is going to require a door frame. So I want you to get a door frame, and I want you to step so that your body is level with the door frame. And you're going to take your right arm, so make sure that your right hip is closest to the door frame, and you're going to take your right arm and bring it up to a perpendicular position. So it's going to be like it's at an L. So my elbow is level with my shoulder, and my hand is just a little bit above my head. So remember, I'm level with the door frame and my arm is resting on that door frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I call a Y slide. So my hand is touching that door frame. I'm going to slide my hand all the way up, touching the edge of that door frame still, so my hand's on the trim. Now what I'm going to do is just step forward, just a very small step forward. And what we're doing is just really opening up that chest. And then I have them take about 3 to 5 deep breaths just right here. And then step back. And then I have them turn the other way, face the other way, so that way they can do their left hand. So bring your left arm up. Left elbow is level with the left shoulder. Left hand is holding that door frame. Do the Y slide. So you're going to take that arm up to it's in about a Y position. And then step forward through the door frame and take a couple of big breaths. So those are a couple of stretches that you can talk about doing with the, with the scalenes, and then also doing with, that the upper chest and the shoulder compartments. So something that's also important to look at here is this serratus anterior. So a lot of times people have no idea what the serratus anterior is, and it's on the auxiliary side of your body, a little bit anterior to your lat muscle, if you know where your lat muscle specifically is an attachment, but it's on that auxiliary line of your body, right underneath your underarm, kind of. And so mid-size of your ribs is a kind of a good visual representation for you. So if you don't exactly know where it is, that's the best representation that I can give you auditorially, I guess. But this is something that if you've ever heard of the push-up with the plus, That is one of the best ways to activate that serratus interior. So go ahead and come into a full push-up position, okay? So, or a full plank. So you're on the up position of the push-up, you're in a full plank. Now what I want you to do is I want you to just, without bending the elbows, I want you to drop the body forward so that you're dropping the chest to the ground, but don't bend the elbows. Okay, so notice how your shoulder blades came back together and they're like holding a pencil between your shoulder blades. Your body is still in the full plank, full solid position. Now press through that position all the way through and make it the opposite so that the scapula and the upper part of the back is almost rounded. You're still in your full plank position. The hips didn't move, the low back didn't move. The only thing moving is the shoulder blades, and then sink forward, holding the pencil between the shoulder blades. Now press through the floor, and then go all the way through. So if you have people do a push-up and at the top of the push-up, push all the way through, so that's the plus part of the push-up, then that is a great way to activate that serratus interior. If you don't want them to do push-ups and to work the front part of the chest, you can have them go through just that plus position and have them activate that serratus interior. Crawling is also a great way to activate the serratus interior. So if during their warm-up, if they're able, having them crawl through a variety of obstacle courses, climbing up and over things on all fours is also another great way to combine that serratus interior. A fun fact for you, if people walked early, and an earlier walker is usually considered someone who walks, at 9 months or before, a lot of times since those babies didn't spend as much time in the crawling position, they do have a slightly weaker serratus interior compared to babies that walked at a later time. So fun fact for you, if you want to know random research tidbits, I'm full of them. So just like the thoracic kyphosis, that's oftentimes combined with the forward head posture. And so this is one of the great options that we've got to look at, and one of the great things that we can see, because this is something that you can just stand anywhere and watch people walk by and you can see a forward head posture. A lot of times clothes or shirts or handbags or backpacks really can hide that kyphosis, the thoracic kyphosis, but ain't nothing gonna hide that forward head posture. So you see right here on our far left side, the correct position is the earlobe, is directly over that AC joint, that acromioclavicular joint. So if this earlobe is forward of that acromioclavicular joint, that is the easiest way to see that forward head posture. This is also found oftentimes with upper cross syndrome. And there are a ton of things that can cause this, but prolonged sitting, we call them desk jockeys, people who sit at a desk all day long, improper desk setup, people who spend too much time looking at the floor or at their computer or at their TV, we call that text neck. Inefficient breathing patterns also can lead to this. And the goals here are to really remove, or if we can't completely remove, maybe at least limit the causes, and then hopefully strengthen those thoracic extensors and the deep cervical flexors. So the great thing about this is that this is so easily identified. And so this is something that's really fun. And if you remember the movie Jerry Maguire, I use this every time I teach this. But if you remember the little kid on Jerry Maguire, he's like, the human head weighs 8 pounds. So think of that quote, the human head weighs 8 pounds. And for every inch your head sits forward, then you are having to hold 10 additional pounds in weight. So then if you're walking around with 10 additional pounds of pressure and of weight put on your spine, that's really going to force the muscles in that upper back and in the neck to work way harder than they should be in order to just keep that head from dropping into the chest. So a lot of times with your muscles in that constant contraction then a lot of times you're going to get a lot of pressure added to the nerves at the base of the skull. And that's really going to give people a lot of headaches. So, this is a really common issue. And I think I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I feel like they say between 65 and 85% of America has some form of this forward head posture position. So that's something that we really want to check out because this is hopefully something that we can really focus on correcting. And the great thing about this is it's gonna help so much more than just their forward head. The first thing it's gonna help is right here is breathing. I go through a lot of really deep breathing exercises, especially with my older clients that sit so much. And I do that for a number of reasons because number one, senior citizens are at a higher risk for pneumonia. So I want to make sure that they have the most efficient breathing that they possibly can have. I want them to have the strongest inspiratory muscles possible. And so we go through a lot of breathing. And a lot of times, those first couple weeks that I work with somebody, and I put them in their posture perfect position, we're seated, we're in a good position, and I have them take a full breath. And the first thing they say is, "Oh my goodness, I feel so much better. Thank you." And my response is always, "I didn't do anything. All I did was told you to breathe." And that is one of the simplest things because whenever you give people more oxygen, they generally tend to wake up and they generally tend to feel more alert and to feel better. So we're going to do a couple of deep breathing exercises, and by a couple I mean one, but we're going to go through it a few times. So what I want you to do right now is to sit up in your chair. Think back about your posture perfect position. If y'all haven't figured out, I really love saying the words posture perfect. So think about that posture perfect position. So our shoulders are down and relaxed away from our ears. They're also nice and back so that our chest is as open as possible. Now I'm going to talk you through this, and I want you to do it just as I say it, okay? So even if you feel like you can't do it, work hard to try to stay with me, okay? So here's what you're going to do. You're in your tall position. I want you to take the biggest breath in that you can, only through your nose though, okay? So breathing through your nose. If you're like me, I have a deviated septum, so I have a really hard time breathing through my nose, so I'm not going to do this with you because you're going to think I'm snoring. So just breathe in through your nose as much as you can. Now expand the lungs, hold as much air as you can. When you think you can't hold any more air, take one more breath in. One more, even bigger. Now, slow and controlled, I want you to slowly breathe that air out through your mouth. So make it almost like you're trying to whistle through a kissy face, through that pierced lips, okay? Slowly breathe it out. Just when you think you can't breathe any more air out, breathe a little more out. Now a little more, and press even more out. It should feel like you're breathing fire. Now, slow and controlled, only through the nose, slowly inhale in. Just when you think you can't hold any more air, take one more breath. And a little more. Expand those lungs as big as you possibly can. One more, inhale. Now hold that. Now through the mouth, through pierced lips, slowly exhale out. You think you can't breathe any more air out, breathe a little more out. And a little more. Breathe all that hot air out. Now slow and controlled, one more time. Here we go. Breathe in through the nose. A little bit more. When you think you can't do it, expand those lungs. Really stretch those intercostals. Stretch all those muscles in between the ribs. Hold it right there. Now, slow and controlled. Exhale it out through the lips, nice and slow. You think you don't have any more air in you. Do one more breath out. One more. It should be super hot. If you're a yoga person, the breath of fire, breathe it all out. Now just relax. Now take a couple of deep breaths in and out. You've got this. Okay, now I want you now to think about that. Now, generally, I have my clients go through about 15 to 20 of those breaths, and we only went through 3. So, what that is doing is forcing you to use all of the capacity of your lungs. It's forcing you to use that diaphragm. It's forcing you to really engage on both the inhale and the exhale. So that's something that we really can give our clients, and that's just the gift of breathing. But that's getting them to use their lungs to the full capacity. So that's something that I will give you a small heads up on. If people don't breathe very well, or they're really terrible at breathing, or a lot of people take really shallow, short breaths, or they hold their breath, oftentimes whenever you get people breathing a lot and they're breathing that often, it might make them a little bit lightheaded. So they're getting a lot more oxygen than they're used to getting, so it's going to make them a little bit more lightheaded. Not everybody gets lightheaded, but I do like to give that small little heads up in case right after you do this, you're like, all right, let's jump up and do something. They might not feel quite ready to jump up right away. So just to be aware of that. Also, here's another fun fact for you because I'm full of them. Have you ever been working out with people or teaching a group fitness class and people are yawning through your class? It's not because you're boring. I mean, you might be boring, I don't know, but most likely it's not because you're boring. It's most likely because they're not breathing properly. And everyone thinks people yawn because they're tired, but a yawn is your body's silent scream for oxygen. So if you're in a group fitness class and you notice that people are yawning, or if you're going with your personal training client and you notice your client's yawning, take them through some deep breathing exercises. Get them used to breathing and coach them on the breathing as they're going through all of these movements, because I would say 8 times out of 10, people are yawning because they're not breathing properly, not because you're boring them. So that should make you feel better about the next time you teach. So now let's talk about, here, let me back up. So we've talked about, how to fix our breathing patterns. We've talked about what all we can do. So now what we want to look at here is how we are going to strengthen these thoracic extensors and these deep cervical flexors. So the first one is your prone chin tuck with thoracic extension. So this is one of my favorite exercises. I don't really have a good reason why this is my favorite exercise, but the majority of the reason why I like this so much is because people don't realize how tight and overworked their neck is. They also don't realize how little range of motion they have on their neck. And this is one of the best ones. So you're going to go ahead and get in your prone position. And as you see, Mike's got his arms out just a touch wider than shoulder width. And what you're going to do is you are going to do the thoracic extension. So it's not a full back extension. So keep in mind, see where his back is on the ground right here. It's just the thoracic extension that we're raising up with the chin tuck. So as Mike is raising up, what he is doing as he raises up is he is just tucking that chin in. I say that the best way to know if you're doing this right is to raise up and then to try to give yourself a double chin. So really pull that in and try to give yourself the most double chin possible. But I always get down on the ground with my clients and make sure that they're not giving themselves a double chin by just opening their mouth, which is what most people will do. So go ahead and jump down. And now that I've told you, you're going to be aware of it, so I know you're not going to do it. So you're going to have your hands down, and all we're going to do is just that thoracic extension. Keep your mouth closed and tuck that chin in. Try to give yourself a double chin. I always say try to look down your shirt, try to look at your belly button, but you've got to keep your body in perfect alignment. Okay, so notice this perfect straight alignment. So just try to give yourself that double chin. And then slowly come back down. We're going to do it one more time. Thoracic extension up. Pull that head back. Give yourself that double chin. And slowly lower down. So again, as the trainer, it's your job to make sure that this head stays in alignment. Don't let them flex the neck forward. That's a no-no. So as they raise up to this thoracic extension, make sure that they're maintaining that posture perfect and just pull that chin in. Try to give themselves that double chin. This is one of my favorite exercises also because if people do have that forward head posture, it also gives a good stretch to some of those different areas, of the upper back and of the neck. So it really will feel great on them. Let's check out our next one here of our next chin tucked is the quadruped chin tuck. So with this quadruped chin tuck, that's kind of a mouthful. You're going to start in this tabletop position here. So we've got our wrists over our shoulders, our knees, and our hips are in alignment here. So same thing in this quadruped position. What you're going to do is you see that what Mike has done is he has went his body in a straight line, perfect here, and same thing. You're just trying to give yourself that double chin in that quadruped position. So press up, give yourself that double position, that double chin, but do not flex that head forward, okay? And go ahead and if you have an iPhone or an Android phone, set up your video camera and video yourself doing this. The reason you can't watch yourself in the mirror doing this is because I don't want you to turn your head. But you should be able to do it and understand, especially if you are really familiar with what your body does and the movements of your body. But somebody who is not super familiar with their body, doesn't have a lot of muscle memory control, is probably going to first just try to flex that neck. So really be aware that what they're doing is maintaining this straight position, and they're doing just that chin tuck, or I like to call it the quadruped double chin exercise. So go ahead and feel free to pause me right now and play back and forth with those couple of exercises and really start to feel about the difference it goes through with the neck, as well as how you feel with your integrated breathing that we talked about and how you do with that, really trying to do the full range of motion breathing. So feel free to pause me. I'm going to still a drink of water before we move on to our integrating stability training. All right, so what we're looking at with integrating stability training into our movement is stability. The easiest way to talk about stability is prevention. So, from a public health standpoint, we always talk about how can we prevent things? What are protective factors? And one thing that we talk about is stability within the home. Coincidentally, stability within your body is preventing movement. So we want to look at how we can prevent flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and lateral rotation. So these great exercises right here that we're going to be talking about is how you can maintain the stability of the body while resisting, or anti-flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and rotation. And these are things that you're probably doing in your training sessions. You just may not necessarily realize how well they're coordinating into stability training. And that's what we want to do, is we want to open up this dialogue to let you be able to explain this not only to you, but also to your clients as well. Our first group that we're going to look at are our anti-flexion exercises. So I just talked to you guys a little bit about how a bridge is one of the best gluteal activation techniques that we can do. But here, whenever we're looking at this, whenever we're looking at this as an anti-flexion, we want to look about how we can layer these on. So your first step, that what you're going to do is you're going to be using just your basic bridge position. So we talked about how the bridge marching that you just looked at, the first step was just the basic bridge. So ignore these bands in Mike's hands and just think about Mike's hands being down on the mat right beside himself. Your first step is just to make sure that your clients can press up into this bridge where the knees form a straight line down to the shoulders. There's no hyperextension or there's no flexion in the hips, but there's one straight line. Once they can do that and hold that position, and there's different bodies of research. Some research says that you have to be able to hold it for 20 seconds. Some people say you have to be able to hold it for 45. Some people say you got to hold it for a minute. So I personally use the 25 seconds is what I use. If they can press up and hold that bridge in that posture perfect position for 25 seconds, then I think they're ready to progress to this bridge with core activation. So now what you see here is Mike has a set of tubing anchored to a Smith machine back here, or probably to a Rogue. And you want this line to be level with the arms as they're extended, okay? So if the arms are straight up overhead, that's exactly where you want the tension point to be, okay? So what he's going to do is he's going to position himself to that, and then this picture on the left is his starting position. So his hips are down, his feet are on the ground, his knees are bent, and he has no tension right here on his tubing. He inhales through the nose, he exhales as he presses his body up here, and he moves this tubing forward towards his hips. I know there's a lot of people that will use that tubing and place it all the way down on the ground. Personally, I go at about a 45-degree angle, which would be to about right here. A little bit more is what I use for that. Everybody's a little bit different, but I have found that that 45-degree angle right there is about the sweet spot where you don't have to worry about them losing the bridge form, and it still gives them that real core activation position. So that is definitely one of the best exercises that we can talk about with the anti-flexion. Now, as we're going through this, keep in mind that the great thing about this exercise, or I won't say the great thing, but one of the most important things that you can do here is to really make sure that you are focusing on the breathing as well as focusing on their posture. So it's so easy for people to get lazy as they are doing this bridge position. So be aware and watch the reps. I found the sweet spot for reps for this exercise is about 8 to 10. If you have a really athletic client, then they're probably very easily going to be able to do more than that. But in my experience, for the average client, about 8 to 10 is where they can do that successfully and without having to worry about any deviations or about having to worry about them losing any of their posture or proper technique. All right. So still looking at our anti-flexion exercises here, we're going to check out the bridge marching. So just like what we did with the earlier gluteal activation exercise, this is very similar to that. So our bridge marching utilizes here the same concept that we just did. And what you're going to be doing, sorry, I have to move my mic. There we go. So what we're going to be doing with this is the same concept. So they are going to hold, and you don't have to use a huge medicine ball. Mike has a little bit of a larger medicine ball here, and that's totally fine. But generally what I use is something a little bit smaller. About a 4-pound ball is what I have had a lot of success with for my clients. And they are just going to hold that directly over their body, and then as they press up into that bridge position, they maintain that directly over their mouth, over their nose. And so as they press up to the bridge, you'll see it kind of angles back a little bit. And then they go through alternating. So the right leg comes up, the right leg returns. They are still maintaining that bridge position. And then the left leg comes up, the left leg returns, they're still in that bridge. And I have them go through the right leg, the left leg, the right leg, the left leg, and continuing until they do 6 on each side is what I found to be about the sweet spot for my clients. And then they get to come down and relax. That's a pretty easy way for them to do it. If you want to add additional activation to this, then you can have them press up into the bridge position that you see on the left, come all the way down, and then press up again and switch to the left leg coming up, which is what you see on the right hand side of the screen. Come all the way down. So you can really change the tempo and the speed of this bridge marching exercise if you would like. And so there's a couple different variations that you can do with that. Think about your clients, go through them on your own, and think about your clients and think about what they would find to be challenging or exciting or even feasible, quite frankly. So those are some of the easiest and best exercises that you can implement for the anti-flexion. So another oldie but a goodie that we have here is the bird dog. So the great thing about the bird dog, and this is still on our anti-flexion, so the great thing about the bird dog here is that there's a number of ways that you can do this. So in addition to doing just a typical, quadruped position and then extending out the right and left leg, and you can bring them in knee to elbow like what you're seeing Mike doing on the left side. So that's a great option. But there's a lot of ways that you can really challenge this. And so, you'll see that Mike is doing TRXs on the right-hand side. That is one great way. Probably my favorite right now, I won't say favorite of all time, but I'll say right now I've been getting a big kick out of this, is doing a bird dog from an elevated quadruped position. So if you get in your tabletop position right now, and what I want you to do I'm going to do this with you, so I'm going to get on the ground. You're going to hear my mic move again. So if you're on this tabletop position, what I want you to do is to have the feet down, just like what you see Mike doing. And I want you to press through those feet so that the knees are elevated up off for just a tiny little inch. So it's probably, I'm short, so my knees are only elevated off probably about a half an inch to the inch whenever I'm on my toes up in that position. So in this, what I call the elevated quadruped or elevated tabletop position, now extend your right arm out. Now bring it back down. Now extend your left leg out. Still in this elevated position. Now bring it back in. Now extend your left arm out. Now bring it back in. Now extend your right leg out. Now bring it back in. So that's kind of another way that you can add a really great challenge to this bird dog position. And there are so many challenges that you can do with this. I'm not quite brave enough to try the TRX with my clients, the TRX bird dog that you see. Pretty sure that would come out in a bad way, but I've done it and it is not the worst thing you've ever done. I just don't know how I could spot and cue. But it is definitely a great option, and it's the same thing. You'll see that from this TRX, the stirrup position is what your forearm is in, and then you are just alternating through that. The key part of this part, what makes this so challenging, is you are having to maintain equal pressure as you're pushing out with this extended arm, as well as maintain equal pressure to this bent arm. So it is a very challenging, very great exercise. I just don't really have my clients currently, I think, might eat it, quite frankly. But those are some of our also really great anti-flexion exercises. Hope we've given you some good options with the bird dog. That is really one of, and I remember when I first got into fitness, I hated bird dogs because I just didn't think they were fun. I thought they were too basic. But now that I've really kind of grown and looked at some research, this is one of the best things that you can do. So this, now going into a little bit more of an advanced option here, is our reverse mountain climbers. So I will give you a heads up. The limiting factor of this exercise, honestly, is going to be neck fatigue. So your reverse mountain climber is really going to, and you can even see he's got a great neck vein right there. So you're going to see straight line, heels on the floor, extend all the way up. But I want to challenge you to do this reverse mountain climber in a nice and slow and controlled manner. I don't want you to think about mountain climbers where you see people do them in group fitness classes where they're just like bouncing all over the place. You know, mountain climbers are not supposed to be a ballistic exercise. I don't care what anybody says. They are 100% not a ballistic exercise. So, what I want you to do though is to go ahead and get on this bench, get into your reverse plank, and then go through, or you can get into a chair, use a bed, whatever works for you, and alternate through about 3 to 4 different rounds on each side. So it would be 6 to 8 total climbs, but 3 to 4 on each side. And go ahead and use it nice and slow. I want you to notice as you move through this exercise how hard it is to maintain this straight position. Your body is going to want to sit down into this position and make sure that you are talking through with your clients how to build that belt, how to engage that inner core, maintain that intra-abdominal pressure as you're moving through this. All right, I hope you had a chance to go through some of those. If not, make a note to do this at your workout at your gym tomorrow. And make sure that you're going through and understanding about what are the things that you need to maintain through discussions with your clients. You know, quick recap, neck fatigue is going to be one of the limiting factors. They might potentially have some shoulder limiting factors depending upon range of motion. And again, this is not a ballistic exercise. This is nice and slow, nice and controlled. You want them to be able to bring it up to that 90 degrees and press it down. And then opposite side up to the 90 degrees and press down. So again, this is a great anti-flexion exercise. And now we're going to get into another oldie but a goodie. So here we've got a fair amount of resistance. So this is just a very rogue, a very red, I was going to say very thin, but that's not even the right word. So this is the red Rogue Monster Band. Power Systems also has the same thing. If you've been with us at any of our live, we oftentimes use the Power Systems brand. That's what I use in my personal gym that I have for my clients, and they work great. A couple of key factors I want you to take note of. So number one, you start this position with a staggered stance. So staggered stance, soft bend in the knees, posture perfect so that the shoulders are directly over the hips, and then press up. And again, here's the deal. You are not going directly over. So notice that what Mike has done is pressed up, not into a full, that's probably about, I would say that's about 10 to 15 degrees. About level, I always tell my clients, I want your arms to be level with your temples, not your ears. So put your arms level with your temples, not your ears. So that's the trajectory that you want them to press to, slightly forward. The reason is, if you were to have your clients with this monster band press directly overhead into a straight up position, that is going to put an excessive amount of pressure on the lumbar spine. And that is not what we want. We want an anti-flexion exercise, and we want to challenge the core and the body, but we do not want to have to change, the center of gravity so much that it's going to put too much stress on the spine. So we still have to be in a very safe position. So this is our anti-flexion press. And then another key point I want you to write down, please make sure that you change your feet. So I always do these in even numbers of sets, so usually 4 is what I use. That way we do 2 with the right leg leading and 2 with the left leg leading, because you want to make sure that they do everything in as balanced of a manner as possible, is the nice way to say that. Now let's look at some of our anti-extension exercises. Now these are fun. I personally prefer the anti-flexion, I think because I'm better at them. So, but these are still some great ones. So I'm sure that everybody knows dead bug. And what we have done here, so there's a couple of different ways that you can add something to dead bug. So the dead bug exercise is to start in this position right here, okay? And you extend the opposite arm and the opposite leg. So think of a quadruped position and a bird dog position with extending the opposite arm and opposite leg, but now you flipped it. So now you are supine and you are going to extend your right leg and your left arm down. So here in this picture on the left, Mike is holding what appears to be 5-pound dumbbells. You can do these with 1 or 2-pound dumbbells. You can do these with soup cans or no dumbbells at all. If you are a trainer and you're able to maintain and be sure that the band isn't going to move, you can do it with band or tubing on one foot. It just kind of depends upon what you have available to you. So again, you would extend right leg goes down, left arm goes back, and then bring it in and switch. So you're going to then do left leg and right arm, extend back into the position you see on the right, and then come back up. So something that Mike is doing on the right is a very advanced option of dead bug. So he is holding a sandbag. So it requires a lot more of stability in both the shoulders as well as the core and the anti-extension components of this exercise. So these are some of the great ones. The great thing about this is everybody does this in a kind of a different way. So you're going to have people that have probably done this in a Pilates or a yoga course. So you just want to make sure that they're able to breathe. I always have my clients inhale as what I say the bug is dying, so the arms and leg is extending, inhale, and then exhale as they are returning back up. That's a breath pattern that I have always had my clients follow. Some people do it a little bit different. I know that Pilates has kind of some different options that they sometimes use, and that's totally fine. But that is just what I have found to be easiest and best with my clients. Now we're reverse plank. We've done reverse mountain climbers, and now we're going to do this reverse plank. Some people call these suitcases, they call them fold-ups. There's a couple different things that people have called these. So you've probably done this at some form or fashion of your fitness life, but this gives you another option. And you can modify this as necessary. So you can do this in very small movements. So the picture on the left is our start. And then on the right, this is a pretty advanced movement where Mike is. But you can do this in smaller parts. So you can have the legs go from here and then just extend out potentially maybe 1 inch to 2 inch. They don't have to move the full about 8 inches that Mike has done. And then you can also change the movement of the arms. Here's your limiting factor. You must maintain neutral spine. So if any point you see that curve changing, either they're increasing that lumbar curve or decreasing that lumbar curve, then that's whenever we know of where our end point is. So that is your job as the trainer, is to make sure that you are explaining to them to do it nice and slow. If they ever lose that neutral spine, then that's whenever we cease, and that's our stop point. And you can do the reverse plank. You can hold it for time. You can take it out, hold it for 5 seconds, and then take 5 seconds to return to start. Take it out, hold for 5 seconds, 5 seconds, return to start, and feel free to play with that tempo to see what works best with you and with your clients as well. But this is definitely going to be one of the more challenging exercises that you've done. And you'll see people do this with a full extension, so straight legs, straight arms, coming all the way up into pike positions. I mean, there's really a variety of ways that you've probably seen this exercise enacted. There we go. So, if you know me and you have ever been with me, I don't know if you guys remember the core classes that we used to do. Lord have mercy on me. I loved those core classes. I think we had core complete, core conditioning, core reimagined. We did, I feel like we always had enough research to be able to fill about 8 classes of core. And plank saw variations was some of my favorite. So here's what a basic plank saw is. I'm going to have you look at just the right side of your screen first. So a plank saw is whenever you get in a standard elbows and toes, what I call a bows and toes plank. So elbows and toes plank. And what you do is you rock back, so the weight shifts back, so your heels move back to the floor, and you're in more of an extension position. That is the picture on the left that you see. And then you saw forward into the picture on the right. So you go from the right picture to the left picture to the right picture to the left picture to the right. So that gives you an idea about what the movement is. It looks like an old school saw where two lumberjacks would be on each end of a saw with handles, and they would be going back and forth to saw through a very large log. That's the idea. Here's the glory of this exercise. You can do so many things with this exercise. So one variation that we have here, so you have the basic one on the right. Look at the one on the left. Look at what's underneath Mike's toes. Those are gliding discs, ladies and gentlemen, and that will make this very hard. I love it. Give it a shot. So what you were doing is you were sliding back on those gliding discs and then using this full body strength here to slide your body back forward to the starting bows and toes position. Glorious. Give it a try. Hate me later for it. Actually, hate Mike. He's the one who took the picture doing it. But either which way, you will love it. It is phenomenal. There's a couple exercises that I call total body exercises. You know, not everybody agrees with me. You know, some of them are power exercises, but, you know, things like our deadlifts, cleans, those exercises are great full body exercises. I wholeheartedly believe that plank saws on gliding disc is another full body exercise. Try it and let me know what you think. Here's the deal. If you do not have gliders, find a wood floor and use towels. If you have a gym floor, then you can use paper plates, you know, the foamy paper plates that are really slidey. You can use those paper plates. There's any ways that you can make this work that does not require gliding disc. But these are some of the best options that you have. You probably remember this old school exercise, a plank saw variation on a stability ball, where you would put your elbows on a stability ball and be in a plank and roll that ball forward and roll that ball back. Similar concept, just a little bit different of execution, but this is just another couple ways that you can enact this in your daily training routines. So we've done some anti-flexion. Now let's talk about some anti-extension. So just the same thing that we did with the press on anti-flexion, now we have the same press on the anti-extension. So same thing. We've got an anchor point with a red monster band, and we are just soft bend at the knees, staggered stance, pressing as we exhale. We press those arms up and overhead. As the trainer, you need to have a lateral side view of this exercise because you are going to be watching for that back. You want to make sure that they're able to maintain the neutral spine, proper alignment, just like whenever they start, as they press this up. The name of the game for this exercise is slow. So inhale through the nose, and I want you to exhale, and I want you to use the slowest tempo as you extend those arms up. And then slowly return them down. This is not a speed exercise. This is not a thruster or a push press. This is a very slow and controlled press overhead. That monster band is going to want to snap you back like a bow. And so you want to make sure that you are able to use a proper engagement of the inner unit of the core. And then exhale out as you slow and controlled press up and overhead. This is a great exercise. Again, April opinion, take it with a grain of salt. I always do these in even numbers so that we have 2 with the left leg leading and 2 with the right leg leading. So now let's look at a little bit of some anti-lateral flexion. So these are probably pretty standard. I'm not going to lie to you. You've probably done these at some form or fashion. Side planks, I think, are killer, and I absolutely love them. The great thing about side planks is there is a million ways that you can do side planks. So here we've got our side plank variation, and on this first one right here, he has a staggered stance, and Mike has got this arm just crossed over as he's up in his plank, and this arm is resting on the shoulder. That's step 1. That's your first exercise. Once your client has managed to master this, then what I want you to do is to get up into the same position, and while holding it for 20 seconds, I want you to have your client extend this arm straight up and then bend it and straight back down. Straight up and straight back down. And have them continue that movement sequence for the entire 20 seconds or 30 seconds that they have that side plank. Now, you can also do a great thing with this. What I like about the side plank is you can add some, some challenges. So you can keep the feet staggered. You can put them right on top of one another so they are stacked. And you can even lift this top leg up into that star pose. So some great options. With Mike and this dumbbell here, this is just a great way to also be able to hold and maintain. I would also, if it's depending upon how small the dumbbell is, if it's a small enough dumbbell, I would have them bend. Same thing, just like what you see here, bring that dumbbell down to close off the chest and then slowly extend back up and press it up. Having them go through that for that same amount of time that you have them holding that plank. And again, these are just some options and some variations. I'm sure that you have been using side planks for years in your training and programming routines, but it just kind of gives you some few other options for the anti-lateral flexion. Farmer's walk. This is another oldie but a goodie. So here you see that Mike is using a standard farmer's walk, which is a one-side unilateral loading technique here. So this is one way. You have them pick a distance. They walk down and back. Again, as the trainer, you want to make sure that you are watching this position of the body. They need to make sure that there is no lean, no lateral flexion. They are engaging the core and that they are able to do a true walk with this. So if they're having to shuffle, then they need to do a little bit of a lighter weight. This is the advanced version on the right-hand side of the farmer's walk. So the great thing about this is another total body. It's going to challenge everything. Grip strength, balance, coordination. You're going to get a much more engagement of the gluteal compartment as well as the legs and the heels whenever you're doing proper heel-toe walking. And here we have a load up overhead as well as a load down below. So they would go down and back, maintaining this position. Once they return to their starting position, then they would switch their arms. And then their left arm here would go up and their right arm would be down below. And they would do the same distance. So these are great things to add into your training if you do any sort of obstacle courses with your clients or with your group fitness classes. These are great options to add into that. Who does not love a good windmill? So here what I want you to do, if you have not done windmills before, there's a lot of great variations of these. And the great thing that I love about a windmill is because this game is called slow and controlled as well. So we're going to talk about the kneeling one here first. So what I want you to do is I want you to get in a half kneeling position. So I have my left arm, or my left leg, my left leg is out. My knee is bent to a 90 degrees, my left heel is on the floor, and I am in a half kneeling. My right leg is back behind me, my knee is down, And you'll see that this leg right here is a little bit of a cross back. So my left heel and my right heel are almost in a perfect line. Not quite. But it is not, my right leg is not straight back. So there is a little bit of an angle, just like what you see Mike doing with this leg right here, back behind him. So I have a kettlebell, and it is in my left hand. So left hand, that kettlebell is straight up. I am looking at that kettlebell, and I am going to slow and controlled lean over and down, maintaining my vision and my visual on that kettlebell until my right hand touches the floor and I am in this position right here. Okay? Then, when I'm ready, I'm going to have a breath. I'm going to inhale through the nose, and I am going to exhale as I press up to go back to my starting position. Okay? So start with a very small kettlebell. The great thing is that I like this kettlebell. In my opinion, the kettlebell kind of helps me to have, the northern star. It keeps me grounded. It has me a focal point to look at. Okay, so that is your first one. Your second one is your standing variation. So what we're going to do is we are going to go, and you'll see how Mike is in a slightly turned out position. So he's in a wide stance. I tend to do this with my, not a true staggered stance because my feet are not as wide apart. But as you'll see, my right foot is what I have leading right now. I'm in the standing position. My right heel is about an inch ahead of where my left toe would be, okay? So that's your starting position. So your right heel is going to be about an inch forward. And then my left toe has a very small turnout, okay? So I've got that very small turnout so that I have a good neutral base with my hips. So they're not completely square to the front, they're in a good neutral base. My right arm is down on my right thigh. I'm going to take my kettlebell and I'm going to press it up and overhead. So I am going to slowly slide that hand down till my right hand reaches my knee, and then I'm going to, when I'm ready, exhale and stand right back up to my starting position. Okay. Now there's a couple different ways that you can do windmills, and there's a variety of different positions. The number one thing to think of is always to make sure that what you've got is this alignment over here. So no matter what, you want that arm to be up in alignment. You want the gaze to always be up and on your weight. So I love the windmills for that reason. There is a couple of different, if you're a yoga person, there are some side angle positions and extended angles and things like that that people are used to doing with yoga that are very similar body movements. With the windmill with weight, the staggered stance with the about an inch forward is generally what I tend to go towards for this position. Some people do a bigger turnout, and so it just kind of depends upon structural setup of your clients. But these are some great options that you can use. Always start with a very light kettlebell and move through this in a very slow and controlled manner. Because again, the name of the game on this exercise is slow. Now we've gone through flexion, extension, and anti-lateral flexion and extension. And now we're going to look at our final one, which is our anti-rotation exercises. So the pallet press is an oldie but a goodie. And here we have a monster band attached to our point, and we are going to start with that through both of our hands, and our hands are in a looped position over this. We are going to engage our core, keep a nice soft bend in the knees here. Inhale through the nose. We're going to exhale, extend this straight out. And we're going to keep our body from rotating left to right. And when we're ready, we're going to inhale and bring it back in. When you're ready, exhale, extend the arms straight out. And again, this is going to want to pull your body towards that anchor point, and the goal here is to stop from that rotation. If you don't have a monster band and you're working with people in their home, you can do this with your hands on their hands. So as they extend that arm out, you can keep them. So you can give pressure, on the outside or on the inside of their hands, so that they have to resist you pushing them, left or right, or even up to down, which is a little bit more of an anti-flexion extension, but it does give a little bit different of a feel. So you can go either on the outsides or the insides and keep them as they're pressing their arms straight out, and then you just give them resistance as well. So you can use it both with the band and an anchor point, or as the weight with the trainer. So this is one of my favorites, and I feel like somehow or another this exercise got forgotten along the way. But just like what you're doing, the great thing about this is because you're having to maintain this position. And if you've ever been in a plank and you are raising one arm, the tendency is for your hips to open up and the shoulder to open up. So the goal here is to take a medicine ball, and it looks like he's got about an 8 to 12-pound ball. And then still maintaining posture perfect. So notice his gaze never leaves his arms. So gaze maintains at the hands on the floor. Inhale through the nose. Exhale, press that medicine ball towards the trainer. Trainer is going to catch it, return it back, press it back underneath their hand. Same thing. They go through that push. It's a great way about the anti-rotation, purely and simply because the best part about this is because you've got a couple of different things going on. So you have a moving extremity, which is going to want to make your hips open up. So not only are you having to prevent the movement from the rotation of the shoulders, but you're also going to have to prevent the movement and rotation at the hips by only being on that 3-point stance. So this is a great exercise. Work through to see what heavy or weight of a med ball works for you, and I think you'll really be excited about using this with your clients. Da-da-da-da! And I don't have a clock on me, but I think we're probably, hopefully, at time. If I went over, please, I apologize. Know that I still love you, and I hope y'all still like me. So now that you have viewed the complete webinar, please print and complete your 20-question quiz that is required. Then log on to our website at www.exerciseetc.com. Click on the Administration tab at the top right of the screen. Please be sure that you have selected the Integrated Postural Training webinar from the drop-down menu. Then you are going to enter the exact email that you used when you purchased this program. Please transfer your test answers to our website and complete the brief evaluation, where I have no doubt you will give me a shining and glowing recommendation. Please, I'm kidding. Please be honest. And then fill out your required fields, such as your name, your certifying agency, and other things like that. Then you're going to click Get Certificate, and it will be emailed to you instantly. Please note that we ask that you complete this webinar and print the certificate by December 31st of the year in which it was purchased. Certificates with next year's dates or differing dates may not be accepted by your credentialing organization. I thank you so much for spending the last 2 hours with me. My name is April, and I hope to see you again at another Exercise Etc. webinar.